background, that's for sure. So, gentlemen, I've got a question for all of you. Can you remember your first experience with a computer by a show of hands?
Uh, yes, you can't see me, so I can remember it.
Okay, sure. Okay, so let me tell you my first experience, and maybe this will bring back a memory to you. I believe I was in second year engineering at UCD when this gentleman strode into a lecture theater one day and said he was going to talk to us about computer science. Now, what's computer science? I'm thinking. And this gentleman was quite tall, had a crew cut, wore glasses. He had just come back from the United States. I believe he had a PhD, probably in computer science, and he was going to show us the way. So all of us guys were wondering what's going to happen. And I believe we eventually, after a lot of instruction, got to sit in front of what was then probably an IBM 360 machine. They came out in 64 and they were shipping big time in 65. And that would have been about right for us. And maybe UCD in Murray Street got the first one in Ireland. I don't know. But the computer was there and we all started to try and program this computer. Well, there were 4 or 5 in my group with Fortran. And this became an adventure. And as best I can recall, we had a really simple task. We were going to try and get displayed on the computer the following sentence. The quick brown fox, comma, jumped over the lazy dog, exclamation mark. And the first problem we had is nobody could type. So there was a lot of hunting and pecking going on the keyboard. And so we eventually got that done and tried to load it in. And the computer looked and said, nah, I'm not so sure of that. Long story short, we had to correct the program as we'd written it. And we tried to do that. And the computer didn't like that too. And we're trying to figure out what was wrong. And somebody, the big deck of IBM cards, reshuffled the deck and put it back in. And I really didn't like that. And I go splat on all these cards come flying out of the computer. And some of them went on the floor. And I looked at this and I thought, this is never going to work. I mean, how can this possibly work? And I know there were 2 guys who got it. And one, I think, was Mick Barrett, but the other was a fellow in civil engineering, and his name was Mickey Clark. Does anybody remember Mickey Clark?
Yeah.
And Mickey was definitely got the message early on. So, I mean, like a lot of people, that could have been a better introduction. So moving forward, I was always kind of wondering about computer systems and their efficacy and how well they would work with me as an individual. And slowly but surely, I got more and more conversant. So right now, folks, we are encountering the digital divide. And just as a general comment to start with, older adults as a group are on the negative side of the digital divide. The term digital divide not only identifies who uses the internet and who does not, but also gradations of digital exclusion. That is the complexity, depth, and variety of internet use. Lower use rates of computers and the internet among older adults have important social and cost ramifications. As the internet becomes more integrated into everyday life, and that happens every day, people who do not use the internet are more likely to become disenfranchised and disadvantaged. Available literature attributes the digital divide affecting older adults due to the internal characteristics of those older people. And we will review that in greater detail here in just a minute. So let me just share my screen with you folks, first of all. And while I'm doing that, I did a little test with you folks that you're not aware of, but it confirmed what I already taught, and that was that everybody in this group are pretty well connected to the internet Oh, Frank, or rather, somebody's disabled, the host has disabled participant screen sharing. So
Can I do it, or do you have to do it, Peter?
I think it's Peter. Yeah, I think so.
Share screen. Hey, Barry Walsh, any idea what button I'd hit for to enable that?
Yeah, if you go into share a screen, you will see there's an arrow to the right of it.
Yeah.
And there it says you
All
need to
participants.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't have that arrow to the right because I've given the host.
Yeah, I have it now.
I guess this is
Can
all
you
a big
try it
trick
now,
to
Eamon?
put one
Okay,
of us
let's
on.
see. Now we got it. There we go, folks.
We can't
Let
see
me
it.
see. Where'd it go? I had it, and then I didn't have it. So what happened to it? Let me just find it here. Give
Liam, what
me a-
was your comment? You were
Yeah,
making
I got
There we
it.
go.
I got it. I got it, guys. We're good. Okay, so can everybody see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So as you've just found out, we're all encountering the digital divide every day. Just this little incident we had right now is an example. So like it or not, for some people, especially some older people, it's here. This is the way it is. And let's think about that for a minute. The digital divide, in many ways, what was analog is now digital. Where are we going? Will technology start leaving us behind? Will the rate of change become unmanageable? Will we become overwhelmed? Now, do you remember there was Bruce Spassky versus the IBM Blue machine? And I think the first time around, Spassky won, but then the next time the machine won, and it continued to win after that. So that was the case of while the machine was becoming a bit smarter than the individual. So that's something to think about moving forward, but specifically for older folks. And like I said before, I think this group here is much more adept and capable of using the internet and associated digital devices than other older folks in our same age group. So older adults are not monolithic in their internet usage. Adoption rates vary by age, race, education, and income. Each demographic has lower internet usage than younger people. And so that's where the divide is going to really start showing up. So I started looking around for some information on this and came across a group called the Herald Scholarly Open Access. It's a publishing house on the East Coast. And it said, are older adults involved? US internet users rose 50% to 85% from 2000 to 2013. Now, at the same time, older adult users only rose from 14% to 59% in the same period. 50% of older adults don't think they are missing out. They don't intend using the internet in future. So that makes you wonder about how older folks are going to manage as we're moving forward. Now, I looked at that information and I realized, that data is for 2000 to 2013. So is there any more recent information? And there is. So I found this at the Pew Research Center. And this reflects 2012 to 2021. Think about this. Widespread use of cell phones among young people deepened the divide. About 96% of Americans 18 to 29 use smartphones, and that's phenomenal. And that shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. Older adults, though, only 61% of older adults do so. Less use of social media is than expected. And as you can see, there's three groups here. use of a smartphone, use of social media, and those who own a tablet. So less use of social media than expected with older folks. So as you can see here, the older group from 65 plus went from 13 just to 61%. And then for the younger people, 66 to 96, and the same gap holds true for both social media and use of a tablet computer. So less use of social media than expected. That's 45% versus 85% of younger people. And it's less obvious what use of tablets and I presume laptops is similar with a similar lag. So having thought about that, I wonder about near-term effects. Lower use among older adults has significant social and cost ramifications, as I mentioned earlier. Increased use in everyday life says people not online are more likely to become disadvantaged. This is very true in the workplace and for healthcare services. And this is going to get more and more important. Increased internet usage for healthcare delivery and monitoring is going to become a bigger and bigger issue. Evidence that computer and internet usage by older adults reduces the risk of depression, and that's true. For instance, we're all on this Zoom call right now. We're having this good friendly meeting. We're exchanging ideas, et cetera, so we all feel part of the group. Now, this guy here in the picture, he's got it. He's got his cell phone, so he's connected, and he's moving forward in getting connected and being part of this new digital interface that we're all encountering day after day. Now, here are some perceptions. The literature out there suggests that the digital divide affects older adults more because of internal characteristics. And these are, first of all, low levels of computer literacy. Obviously, that doesn't apply to this group or similar groups, but generally, older people tend not to be that well connected with computer systems. They've also got technophobia. Can you imagine now if you have to go to your doctor and the only way you can communicate with your doctor is via a digital interface, a cell phone or a computer or whatever, and you've never used one of these phones and you've got to, or whatever, and you've got to communicate with this person via this digital interface and you've never done it before, that's going to be quite a bit of a challenge. So you're going to be concerned about it. Another thing is, conversely, is that even though they're supposed to be doing it, a lot of older folks don't see the usefulness in using the digital interface. And of course, as people get older, physical and cognitive deficiencies are going to make it even more complicated. So there's another impact too that hasn't never been discussed, and that is ageism for folks who are older and trying to use digital equipment. And let's just talk about that for a second. What exactly is ageism? It's the fear of being old, and there's two sides to this. There's younger people and older people. And first of all, there's the feeling of being old, and we're all getting older all the time, guys, and we've all got concerns, obviously. You've got concerns about disease and disability, a fear of powerlessness that you can't be yourself moving forward, and then uselessness, and of course, that inevitable last trip to the cemetery. Now, there's 2 points of view on this. There's the older people who feel those concerns, and there are the younger people who look at older people and feel this way for the opposite reason. So here's something I found with the Institute of Public Health at Washington University. 82% experienced one or more forms of everyday ageism they taught in their day-to-day lives. 65% felt exposure to ageist messages. 45% felt ageism in interpersonal interactions. And 36% felt that this exposure had been internalized into them as individuals. So absorbing all of that, one has to wonder, well, here's a reality check. Young people don't understand what's difficult about today's technology. They've had it from the giddy up, we have not. Seniors feel alienated and often don't know why. Now, here's one smart senior's observation which defines what the outcome can be. This is Suzanne May, and I found her on Quora, which is an online blog. She's got an MA from the University of London, and she lives in Somerset. She's a former teacher, mother, pensioner, volunteer, and she was asked various questions, and one of them is, what is a no-no for senior citizens? And she says, refusing to learn how to use the internet. It's not difficult, and it's infuriating for younger people to hear seniors refusing to learn how to access the many benefits it has for them. And that may become a bigger issue as we're all moving forward. So conclusions, well, let's reflect between the US and Europe. In the Europe, 40% of older adults, 50 to 74, use the internet compared to 75% of the overall population, whereas the US Census data says that 58% of older adults have internet service compared to 74% of all households. So it appears that the USA seems to be a little bit ahead of Europe. And when you think about it, you know, the USA right now is one single country. Everybody speaks English. There's ready access to digital devices of all kind. If you order on Amazon, you'll probably have it in 48 hours. Whereas perhaps in Europe, there's a lot of different countries, a lot of different people speaking different languages, and maybe access to equipment isn't as readily available. So that may account for the difference. But either way, there is a lag between older people and younger people in terms of adoption and usage. So overall, what are the conclusions here? First of all, old folks are not using the internet as they should. They feel overwhelmed. There will be consequences. And young people need to help old folk with their digital divide. So that's my little preview here, guys. And I will return control to Frank, and we can discuss things if you want. So let me move out of here, change around, and stop the share. There we go.
I'd like to make one observation that you focus on the age thing. Now, you by Googling at all on the digital divide, 3 categories jump out at you. One is ageism, as you say, you know, elderly. The other is rural access, which is very significant, major issue within the telecommunications industry. And the third one is young people, or sorry, not young people, but low income people without the same access to the internet. Okay. And then when you tie all of those together, there's the issue, you know, the question, is this good or bad? That's one thing. You seem to be focusing on what those who don't have access are losing out on. But I would beg to introduce the subject of where this generation is just having things talk to things, and nobody reads, or you have the reality TV or electronic gaming, or you have information overload, or all of these other aspects. So is the internet destroying us?
It may be. And you have to have selective usage of various devices. I mean, you don't want a system to start to control you. You want to control the system. And that's, you know, that's a valid question, Basil. And it comes back to, how are you using digital media? Are you all in, all invasive, or are you a person who selectively uses different equipment to whatever benefit you need from that particular piece of equipment?
Well, one subject that we've talked a lot about is, you know, on the hard copy stuff. For example, you take the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal and the Washington Post and the local papers and Time Magazine and The Economist, and you're working on your computer all day. I don't want to see anything anymore in the evening. I want to just use, the old-fashioned methods of communication, because
You mean you want to read something rather than watch it on TV
Yeah,
or
exactly.
on computer?
exactly.
And that's not a surprise. And there's lots of evidence now that there is the blue light that comes with most electronic devices now, where if you keep watching it over a period of time, that's not a good thing for you and your brain. So maybe it's in a reaction to watching a screen all day. You just don't want to watch one anymore, and you want to read something which is not kind of feeding this blue light back at you all of the time.
That was a great presentation. Very, very thought-provoking, and some very interesting things in it. Very interesting. And Basil, they were very good comments as well. I mean, I think what you're both saying is there's a middle ground. On the one hand, you have people who are suffering because of lack of access to the internet.
Right.
My mother-in-law is one of them. I tried my hardest to get her onto a smartphone, and it just crashed and burned. I spent ages on the last 3 visits to Ireland, and it just, she couldn't handle it. She's getting very anxious and really feeling very inadequate. And I tried to baby step through it, but to no effect. At the other extreme, if you look at or Google or whatever, the number of people who get their news from Facebook is very, very scary. And as you know, Facebook is full of what is called clickbait, which is an outrageous story that has no foundation whatsoever. It's something somebody made up. The sole purpose is to get you to click on it so they get advertising revenue. So people are reading this clickbait shite and swallowing it and thinking they know what's going on. So it is definitely a double-edged sword.
So where do you draw the line? I mean, you have to kind of wonder, what is my level of engagement, and what am I going to watch, or what am I going to use, and how am I going to control the input I'm getting? Like you're saying, Peter, if you listen to some of that stuff long enough, you'd start to believe some of it, which is utterly ridiculous. And we've got a midterm election coming up here in the United States right now, where we've got one party that seems to be absolutely pushing all of this crap, and they're using every available means to them. And they're starting to change perception of people who normally should have common sense, and seem to be being taken away by the delivery systems that are giving them all these messages.
But one other point there, Eamon, tied in, is that we've experienced a lot through COVID.
True.
With the assumption that what we've learned is going to continue. However, now what are some of the things that happened during COVID affecting the internet? Healthcare, telemedicine, virtual classrooms, online shopping, working remotely, and technology-based social interactions. Okay, now you put all of those together and you say, this is the new world. But now that COVID is over, things are starting to revert back to the way.
Well, maybe not as much as you think. For instance, a lot of people who discovered they could work remotely and work from home and didn't have to go to the office, that's changed their whole outlook on how they're living their lives. And suddenly you've got, a segment of the working population have gone back to work. But there's another segment of the population, and it seems to be growing, that's saying, hey, I don't have to go to work now. I mean, you know where I am. You can find me at any time. I am just as useful at home as I ever was at work. I don't have to do all of this stuff about getting in my car, getting out in the freeway, battling all that traffic down to wherever, and getting to my office and getting there in time in the morning so you can see me in the office at whatever time you want me there. I can be here that much faster, that's much more productive, and I can do it right now. So why do I have to go to the office? So that's a whole mindset that's changed. And that's a segment of the working population that, believe me, is changing.
But even like on Wall Street Journal on last Saturday, you look
Mhm.
back a year ago and they were considering paying you more, okay, to work from home because of many of the variables that were happening that people were not accustomed to. On Saturday's Wall Street Journal, it listed all these companies that are thinking of reducing the income of those who continue to work from home. So, okay.
Well, you know, that's just their knee-jerk reaction to the fact that, you know, they can see a way to reduce expenses, and they're hoping that the people who are already at home have got enough inertia now that they don't want to go back to work, and they will suffer the reduction in income just to be able to continue working from home. So if that is a trend that's happening with big business, then it's just a cheap shot at the workers, like, well, a lot of things that have happened in the past.
Okay, my 2 cents worth, and as to frame the way my brain thinks, I'd refer Frank to a book that he got a present of, and I'm not sure if he read it yet, 21 Lessons for the 21st Century. And a very important point for me in that was, in the current world, we need to learn how to educate ourselves and others by the core technique of critical thinking. And with the knowledge of psychology out there and the ability to manipulate, as shown in the social media, if you don't have that ability and you're going into communication with that ability, you actually get channeled in a way that you're predisposed to go at anyway. So I think the world we're in at the moment is in a state of major transition. So that's the first input I'd make. So I'd speak to, hey, how does this impact on me? So I'm in a bubble at home with a wife who had a stroke 10 years ago. I'm in semi-isolation and I'm coping, I think, pretty good. So COVID comes along and I see it being the new modern tools being applied to that COVID environment. And using my critical thinking, I say, here's some wonderful opportunities. I join your group, and I start learning about Zoom, and I go and exploring in Zoom, and I've used it a heck of a lot in my work, and I apply it to other places as well. Also, instant shopping. I haven't been to a store for 6 months. And hey, oh, that's sad. No, it's brilliant. I have made the free choice that I have nothing that I need to go to the store for. And I will go internet shopping to stores where they will say, hey, Peter, we're going to send you this to play around with. Don't feel bad if after testing or evaluating you return. So it's not a lose-lose, it's a win-win, because I deal with people who like that model. So with the modern tools out there, if you have critical thinking, it's a wonderful opportunity to move on.
And that's true. And so a question kind of comes up then, where do I feel empowered and where do I feel overwhelmed? And in my case now, I can be in my apartment all day long. I can do everything I want to do almost, and be online and do various things, and never, like you said, I never go to, hardly ever go to a store anymore. I'm online banking all of the time. I've got like 6 different homeowners associations, 3 different property management companies, and I communicate with those people all the time online, and I never have to see any of them, and it's all working very effectively. So I can just be in this little cocoon, and I get into this kind of twilight zone moment where I'm inside and I'm in this cocoon and I can do all this stuff. And then almost by accident, I have to go outside, and it's a nice, bright, sunny day outside, and it's beautiful. And what am I doing inside? And hey, you know, so that kind of feeling you get is that, how empowered do I want to be? and how much empowerment leads to being overwhelmed. So
a major critical one is, and it's shown up in early presentations from some of our members here, and that is the human interaction and the physical presence of other humans. And if you become isolated from that in an involuntary way, that you're not in control or managing it, that can kill you very quickly. So that empowerment you're talking about has to be balanced with who am I and how much face-to-face I need. And I saw people I worked with in their 40s, and they were so deprived of that human contact. They were actually visibly withdrawing and physically down on our Zoom meetings because of that.
And I can understand that happening. So, and you know, we were talking there about, and Peter mentioned it, the way things like Facebook are feeding you information that's totally untrue, and if you read it long enough, you start to wonder if it is true and stuff like that. So where does the line draw between being served by the system and being manipulated by the system? And you know, again, I'll mention that election coming up next Tuesday. You got to feel that there's these computer systems that are working hard all of the time, and they're starting to make people's decisions change maybe a little bit because of information they're being fed that is factually not true. But if you hear it long enough and often enough, you start to say, hey, maybe it's a point of view, and that's not a good trend for anybody.
Yeah, Eamon, you asked earlier on about, you know, the first time we encountered computers.
Right.
My first one was also that Fortran class.
Yeah.
And when I came over to Westinghouse as an electrical engineer in the plant in Bloomington, within a few days of getting here, I was asked by the senior engineer for whom I worked, can you do programming? Because they had just got a timeshare computer and they wanted some very tedious but very expensive calculating done. And I felt my life passing in front of me, and I thought about that Fortran class and I said, yes, sir, I can program. Now I figured they're not going to be using Fortran. They're probably using one of these newer languages, and I was right, it was BASIC. And, you know, BASIC compared to Fortran is like, you know, pretty freaking simple. That changed my life and my career. I became the computer guy, and for the rest of my career, I was in the IT business. And so I've been very fortunate to be at the front of this frontal wave all the time. And if you're in the computing business, you better be able to handle change or you're going to get left behind. So I learned real fast to be a very, very active change agent and be willing to take change. So I don't feel overwhelmed, but I'm very fortunate to have had that break early. If I hadn't had that, I don't know where I'd have gone.
Yeah, and good for you. And I understand that feeling of transition. I was working in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I was working out of my house as an account executive with this East Coast company. Everything was analog. And we had one guy who was using a computer, and we went to this meeting and he was able to show all these charts and graphs, which was really impressive. But the guy wasn't producing any orders. So that kind of deflated anything he had to say. But in my case, I realized I got to do something about this. And I was fortunate to get the opportunity to move to California from Minneapolis. And I went from a totally analog world to an initial digital world where I was using a computer at a desk all day, every day. So I was making the transition there. Now I was probably 10 years behind a lot of other people, but at least I got the message at that point that this is the way of the future and you better be with a guy or you're going to get left behind. Or as one guy in one meeting that we had about computers and using computers in a field Salesforce, I'm sitting outside with him after a meeting and he turns around to me, he says, this is the best computer I know, and shows me, he says, my number 2 Ticonderoga pencil. So you can imagine you know, what happened with him and the use of computers.
He's
And you
now
could,
saying, would you like to have some cinnamon on your coffee?
there you go, you got it. So, and change is inevitable and change is constant, but the concern you'd want to have moving forward is how much change can we handle? I mean, every time you turn around, like you got Rev 8, you got Rev 10, you got Rev 2.0, you got, every time you're just settled into a system and know how to use it, there's a new one out and you got to relearn everything again.
Eamon, a new barometer that I'm thinking of, and that is, what would it tell about a country and the people there if you were to know the IT infrastructure that they have? And for example, in the United States, there seemed to be an attitude to disable the government over here and to keep them really back. A lot of the systems in the US government are DOS, I believe, still.
I believe it.
And I'm wondering, with our friends present from Ireland, what's the sense of the technology infrastructure within the government? Is it up to speed or is it way behind, or anybody any idea?
You can see the problems that we had in the health service, where we had the virus last year, and that was down to, well, obviously somebody made a mistake, but when they looked at the various systems, first of all, they're not integrated, and they're all old and using, you know, very old operating systems. So I think what's happened has been the level of investment that was required, or that is required, just wasn't being made, and it was quite an expensive lesson that we've all learned in that regard. And I would be surprised that, you know, in other major entities of government, the same situation arises, is that there's that sort of lethargy and inertia in not up, you know, if it works, you know, why bother changing if it's working fine?
There are some departments of government where there would be more efficient, more effectively use of computers. I'm thinking of the Revenue Service. Judy
Yes.
has to interact with them quite a bit, and she is constantly surprised and impressed at the sophistication of their systems.
Yeah, and I would agree with you. The same thing, I found the same thing with the passport office. I think the passport office is really, really good.
But it came from nothing, Barry. I'd say 5 or 6 years ago, you'd have been tearing your hair out of the passport office.
Yeah,
they've upped their game quite significantly in the last 5 or 6 years, particularly recently.
yeah.
So we're not. I would say it's a mixed bag, Raymond.
I think some are good. I mean, I was thinking of the two that you mentioned, both Revenue, which are very good, and Passport. Passport had a problem a few years ago, but now they're very, very quick.
Absolutely.
I know that Vivian's nephew wanted to come over from the UK and his passport was out of date. And they said they would have it for him in 10 days. He got it in 5. So they really are very good. So some of them are good and some of them are not so good.
Mixed bag.
Some of them, as Raymond said there, particularly with the whole health service, but when they brought in the HSE, I think they had 10 different IT systems in place. So they got one. So they ended up down to 11 because the original 10 were still there, and then the one, etc. So
it's still much the same, John. We still have a fair bit of interaction with the HSE, and each section of the country has a different billing system, a different payment system, and that is a bit scary.
I think that there was a benefit recently, I think, during COVID, when that had that big problem. And I know that I went into the hospital, and basically what they had was they had a paper system. So they kept the paper system going, which was fine because everything else was gone. So there was a benefit in that particular regard, but I think it's very varied.
Yeah, and an example of what I'm talking about, if a country has a really good IT system, so go back a couple of years, COVID happens, there's an absence of data, longitudinal and population data, and the Israeli authorities contact the two main manufacturers that are supplying the US now, and they say, we have population and longitudinal data that can accelerate your testing to get approval, and we will make that available to you, and I will bet $1 to a dime, and the condition is we'll make that available to you. We'll be the test cases, and you give us the most advanced vaccines to use on our population. So it can be a major win-win in the current world.
Well, if
I've always found with
internet with education, what is the focus today on education in the United States? But actually, globally, it's on STEM, right? It's on science, technology, engineering, and math, and where a prerequisite very soon in the future is going to be coding. You won't be able to graduate from high school unless you have experience in coding. So,
Yeah.
so that's the generation that's happening through the internet now.
Yeah, now if you're an older person and you wanted to say do a graduate degree in whatever discipline, and say, well, you're not even our age, but you're quite a deal younger, and you want to do this, and you've got a regular job, and you're going to do this online, and you want to do your MBA or whatever online, and you discover that they've got all of this software that you have to be familiar with and adaptable to in order to just get the coursework done. And so suddenly, quite apart from studying the MBA or the MS or whatever, that's one thing. Just getting familiar with the delivery system and how you're going to present it with the information is a complex task all by itself. And you've got these whole wide variety. You've got, what is it, Google Groups, you've got this kind of software, that kind of software, and you may have 3 or 4 different kinds of software that you've got to be able to handle individually, and you got to know in advance how to use them. So that by itself is getting to be another challenge.
But you know, human beings have proven over the millennia that we are extremely adaptable.
True.
I think people adapt to those things fairly easily.
I have to say, there was one of your charts there, Eamon, that intrigued me. It was a series of graphs showing the take-up of digital stuff.
Correct.
By various age groups. But it was, the middle one showed the use of social media by the younger age groups dropping off.
Yeah, and you know, I wondered about that too. That's a very good point, Paddy.
Is it just a momentary blip, or is it the start of a trend? Which would be encouraging in view of all the negative things what people were saying earlier about the effects of social media on the political system in particular.
Yeah, and
I'd be wary of that data.
Right.
What's the
and I
definition
wonder
of
about the
social media?
deliveries.
I would put it to you that a lot of that data is related to Facebook, or now called Meta. And yes, young people are abandoning Facebook in droves by the millions every day. And so if that is the reading of they're losing interest in social media, I would say that's false data, because what they're moving to is TikTok.
Okay.
Well, that may change
What
soon.
did you say, Barry? You said this false data because something?
They're moving to TikTok from Meta.
Oh, I'd agree. I think they're branching out. There's multiple social media
Platforms. Yeah.
multiple.
But I'd be surprised if TikTok is not classified as social media, or Twitter or Instagram. They're all that family, I would assume.
Yeah, all I'm saying, Peter, is if the data that they're gathering are interactions with, you know, particular forms of social media, then there'll be a huge amount of data presented where, oh my God, there's all these young people that have quit using Facebook. They're abandoning social media. No, they're not. They're just abandoning.
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, I know. Obviously.
Yeah, understood.
And now, just this morning, there's this announcement that the US government is starting to wonder about TikTok. So you get back to the US versus China thing again, where they're saying, hey, there's this subliminal control by China of TikTok. And do we want to be a part of that? And that's just happened like in the last 24 hours. So maybe there'll be a reversal and there'll be people going back from TikTok to Meta again. I don't know.
Eamon, data coming from the US government. In the past, when I was younger and here early, I always had the perception that when a guy became the president, he rose above the fray and became the president of all the people. So today or yesterday, you have President Biden saying, we are at risk as a democracy, and if you don't vote Democrat, the other side are against democracy, and we're in mortal danger.
Well, based on some of the things that are happening around the country in terms of Republican people in various states and how they're trying to manipulate the election process that's already in place, you can't help them. You can't not let him say it or allow him to say make a statement like that, because it seems a reasonably legitimate thing to say. I mean, if you're talking about polarization right now, you've got this present Republican Party are dead set on one thing and one thing only, and that's getting back in power. And they don't seem to care what means they use to get there. And they've now segmented it down to the various states, and who knows what may happen.
Yeah, the point I'm making is with that really serious situation, a week or two before an election, that the president is saying our democracy is in mortal danger, and we're quoting that same government and that same entity with respect to this country, this fact, that fact, and we're saying, oh, they've said it, so it must be true.
Well, they count me out there.
Based on what's already happened in the last couple of months or so, you can't blame Biden for making that statement. He's got enough ammunition out there already to be able to make a statement like that. And the fact remains that, you know, messages can be changed, messages can be misinterpreted, and messages can be just plain lies. And if the delivery system is programmed to do that, then you got a problem.
But on the subject of Biden, I mean, I have every sympathy for what he's trying to do, and I would, if I was in the States, I've no doubt I'd be voting Democrat. But the optics of the man, as we see him here on television, are not good. He looks old.
Well, he is old. For
hey, we're not going to be ageist on this program. Thank you very much.
But the guy looks old, and he looks frail, and he looks as though he's not in control. And that must be a worry for people whose sympathies lie with democratic politics.
Yeah. Now, let me point out something there, Paddy. Our buddy Trump is 78, is it already? There's only a 4-year gap between them. And the difference is that Trump is so fat and heavy and big at 6'3" that he just looks bigger and more, you know.
He looks more energetic, Eamon. He looks more vital. He looks healthier.
He looks younger.
He looks, yeah, he does.
Yeah, and he is. He's 4 years younger. That's all.
He looks fitter. He looks a lot fitter than the other.
Oh, come on, he's not fit. The guy's BMI is probably about 35 or something.
Yeah, but the other side looks like he's going to fall over every time he walks.
Yeah, and I understand that, and you know, I don't know how you can change that. I mean, he's not going to go out and run 20 miles to get fitter or better.
When was the last time anybody in Ireland saw Trump do anything other than stand behind a rostrum with a microphone? Have you seen him walk around?
No.
Have you seen him running onto a stage?
Yeah.
Biden has to do all the things I'm talking about. Trump doesn't do shit except ride a golf cart.
Yeah, but surely, Barry, he's more in control of his optics than Biden is.
He is absolutely, because he doesn't have to do anything, Paddy.
Yeah.
I think you put the words on it, optics there. You sound as if you're talking about the Rose of Tralee. I mean, I look at the man and what he says and when he says, to me, make him the strongest, not the weakest man in the Western world.
Well, there are a lot of people that look at it differently and really do think it's a beauty contest. And they want, Paddy's got a point. The way you look and the way you act and the way you come across visually is very important. And yeah, I hate to say it, but yeah, Trump's doing better than Biden on that.
The sad thing about it all is that we live in a gerontocracy. You know, we've got two key presidential, the president and the pseudo president. We've got Nancy Pelosi, who's 82. We got Dick Durbin, who's 80. You know, all of these people, and it's time we moved on to the next generation in this country. And I'm hoping that in 2024 we'll get a chance to do that. Biden should. I mean, I'm a fan of Biden, but he should not run again.
No,
yeah, and he may not. He may look in the mirror and say, "Yeah, it's time to pack it in." But,
we veered off topic a little bit.
Thank you for saying that, Peter.
My fault. Apologies.
Yeah,
I mean, look at Britain. You know, I mean, it's a mess. But they have a 44-year-old prime minister. You know, or 42-year-old. I think he was born 1980. In Ireland, you're going to have a new Taoiseach soon, I presume, and he's in his 40s, I presume. You know, we are so old in this country in our politics, and it's time we moved on to a new generation.
Look how old our own president is.
Well, he's a wonderful man, but he's a titular figure.
Yeah, but
that's true.
Frank, before too long, Marjorie Taylor Greene will be in charge, and she's in her 40s. We're covered.
Well, I'll be glad to be dead by then.
Yeah. So trying to get back on the straight and narrow here of this subject, I'm in this situation now where I'm trying to go personally from analog to digital. So I'm trying to go from paper to no paper. And believe you me, that's a challenge. I mean, I've got some people, no problem. I send them everything digitally and we're good. And then there are other people that like paper and they'll take paper, but they keep pushing you towards doing this online or getting your cell phone and put it on your cell phone and all that kind of stuff. So I'm doing the best I can. And I can see a world not too far away where nobody will be using paper anymore. And
we've been talking about paperless since the 80s, and it's never happened.
That's true.
There is less paper used, but you know, the idea of going completely paperless is, I don't think it's sustainable.
Well, 100%.
Can I say,
Frank, but I think more and more and more things are going digital. I'm having my dinner now. My wife brought me my dinner because I'm going to an IU basketball game tonight here in a few minutes. And I just got an email this afternoon from Indiana University, which I will acknowledge is way, way further up the digital curve than most places. And they just announced no cash at any of the concessions, not at the ticket office, not where you buy a Coke, not where you buy popcorn or anything else. Credit card or mobile phone touch, etc. No cash whatsoever.
Yeah.
Yeah, now that's a growing trend here in California too.
5 years ago. That's the way it's been in Korea 5 years ago. No cash.
That happened here during COVID. No, all these places have up plastic, please, no cash. And you know, for a paper, €2 or €3, it was plastic.
Hey guys, before I forget, we're coming towards the end.
Yeah. Now let me ask you a quick
just
question.
a quick one, Eamon. Something interesting to look out for tomorrow. It'll be an interesting indicator, and that is the Prime Minister of Germany is meeting with the boss in China. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
Is that the Prime Minister or the fellow who used to be Prime Minister a few years ago and shouldn't have gone near the place? Bit of a Putinophile.
Chancellor.
It's the Chancellor. It's the Chancellor, yeah.
It's the Chancellor, okay. Because the other guy, Schultz, went over. And Schultz is a bit of a...
This is Olaf, isn't it? Olaf. What is that his name?
Yeah, that's the Chancellor. But Schultz is not the Chancellor, but he was high up, and he's around talking to people that he shouldn't be talking to, including China.
He was before Merkel, wasn't he?
Yeah.
He was the Chancellor before Merkel, and he was very much involved with the Russians.
Yeah,
that's the one.
That's the company boards.
On the Russian payroll.
Yeah,
it'll be a real barometer of the effect of American pressure on Europe and Germany to see how they handle the interaction with China. It'll be very, very interesting.
Yeah.
Guys, I think
So,
it's about.
Eamon, your wrap up. I'd love
Yeah.
to hear your wrap up because I have to leave here in 3 minutes.
okay, so here's the latest now, guys. Think about this. There's a hot rumor going around the web now that the United States of America, the federal system, is going to develop a digital currency system starting the 1st of January next year. Now, I've talked to various people, and some people have never heard about it. Other people say this thing is coming. Other people saying that Biden signed this into law like 14610 or something is the number of it, and that's going to happen next year, and that we're suddenly going to have a digital currency here. I find that hard to believe, but obviously they've got to be thinking about it, even though a lot of people hate it and don't want having to do with it. But that may be starting with, you know, no cash transactions to what are we going to do next? And that could be a digital currency. And, you know, what do we do with digital currency? I mean, I've got all this spare change here that I won't be able to use. And is it true that has anybody heard anything about this?
No.
I think that's a conspiracy theory, Eamon.
Well, it could be a far right thing to get people motivated about the election and stuff like that. But the US government has got to be thinking about the future and a digital currency system. It seems inevitable.
Eamon, that's a whole other topic, but
Correct.
briefly, with Bitcoin, several countries have investigated that option, and there's a major pressure acting at the moment with certain countries who shall be nameless to take away dependency from the US being the global
currency.
Well,
yeah, that's been around for a long time.
There's a lot of things happening at the moment in that area. So I think Paddy Lord, after his talk on travel, may make a presentation on
There you
that.
go. Yeah.
How's that Bitcoin digital currency working out for Ecuador?
Not very well.
Thank you.
I think it's time that we stop the recording and perhaps
Sure.
thank Eamon very much for a very interesting presentation.
Yeah, excellent.
Great
Absolutely.
discussion as always.
Yeah.
And if you stay on, I'll disable the recording and we'll stay on for a couple of minutes and decide on what our next topic will be.
I got to leave, Frank, but before we go, I want to ask the folks in Ireland, who has seen Bad Sisters?
I didn't like it. After about 3 episodes, I gave up.
Is it showing over there yet?
Never heard of it.
Me neither.
It has a different name over there.
It's an Irish TV series, 10 episodes, set in Dublin. The scenery is repeatedly the 40-foot, Sandy Cove, Bull Island, Howth, Dunleary,
Malahide.
Collymore Harbour, blah, de, blah, de, blah. And it's about 5 sisters in Dublin.
Sharon Horgan.
It had a different name in Europe, the show, I believe. It wasn't called Bad Sisters. It's called something else.
And who was Sharon?
Sharon Horgan.
Sharon Horgan.
Yeah, and
Never heard of it.
Bono's daughter's in it.
Yeah, it was made for Apple TV or with Apple TV over here. But it's a completely Irish production. I mean, the whole thing is filmed in Dublin and Wicklow.
I got bored.
I loved it. I thought it was great. You should have stuck with it, Frank. It got better.
After 3 episodes, it's enough. 3 of 10, I'll give it, but I won't continue on after that. There's too much other good stuff to watch. Any case, I'm going to stop the recording, folks.